Declining the family vacation because my sister expects me to babysit her kids. I, 23, have often found myself stuck acting as a babysitter and helper during family outings. It got so frustrating that I eventually moved out of my parents' house because I was constantly being made to watch over my 3 nephews. Last summer we all went on a family vacation to the coast. I tagged along with my parents and they covered the cost of my hotel room. However, I ended up sharing that room with my sister's 3 energetic boys since she and her husband wanted their own private space. I was told I'd have time to enjoy myself on this trip, but instead I got stuck watching the kids most of the time. When I complained about it, everyone brushed it off and reminded me that I was there for free. In the end, I only got to do one activity I genuinely wanted: visiting an art gallery, which is something I always enjoy at the coast, but since the kids found it boring, I was made to feel bad about that too. Now my family is planning another beach trip this June, and they just assumed I'd tag along the same way as last year. But this time I told them no. I made it clear that I'll be driving myself and covering the cost of my own hotel room, to ensure I have my own space. My parents were taken aback and tried to warn me about how expensive that would be. I reassured them that I can handle the costs just fine. I've got a stable job and a reliable car, so there's no issue. Then came the buts. I explained exactly why I wasn't repeating last year's experience. I want to enjoy this vacation as an adult on my own terms, instead of being treated like a babysitter. My parents relayed this to my sister, and she wasn't happy. She called me, furious, saying that I'd ruin the vacation if I was off doing my own thing while she had to manage her 3 kids. I lost my temper and reminded her that last year she dragged me into her chaos, leaving me with little time to enjoy myself. I refused to let that happen again. And I was painted as the villain just for wanting to visit an art gallery. I'm a grown adult and I think I deserve to enjoy my own vacation too. Now my sister isn't speaking to me, and my parents keep urging me to ride with them to keep the peace. Despite the pressure, I'm holding firm on my decision to refuse. Am I wrong for standing my ground? I understand they'll struggle more without an extra pair of hands to help, but I don't think it's fair for me to give in. Edit. It's only been an hour since I shared this, but it turns out my sister is a morning Reddit reader and she stumbled across my post. She's furious, not just at me, but also at the fact that no one in the comments seems to support her. She launched into a lengthy tirade about how hard it is to raise triplets, arguing that as someone young and single, the least I could do is help her out because she needs a break. I stayed firm on my decision, which led her to rope our parents into the situation. Now I'm bracing for an incoming call from them. Update. Now that I'm off work, I can share more about what happened. To put it bluntly, it's over. My sister brought our parents into the situation, and after they read my post and saw the flood of comments, they were both shocked and furious. They're upset with me for posting about it online, but I told them this wouldn't have happened if they had just taken my concerns seriously in the first place. I'm tired of the keep the peace mentality that always puts me on the chopping block just to appease my sister. This time my parents finally turned their anger toward her. Long story short, the entire vacation has been cancelled. No reservations have been made yet, but now everyone's at odds. My parents are fighting with my sister is blaming me, and my nephews are upset because they won't get to go to the beach. During my lunch break, my sister called me and made a snide comment about how I don't have a life, which is why I should be available to help her. I recorded that conversation and shared it with our parents. Now that's the latest point of contention between them. Small update. I wasn't planning to add more, but here's one final note. My parents have finally acknowledged that forcing me to babysit last year was unfair. They promised not to push me into looking after my nephews again. Right now my parents are furious with my sister for telling me I should help her just because she thinks I have no life. As usual, my sister is playing the victim, while my brother-in-law has decided to distance himself from the drama by burying himself in work. Huge thanks to everyone who commented. You've truly brightened my day. Update 1. My parents have apologized, though my sister initially did not. About a week ago I created this throwaway account to ask if I was in the wrong, and I was found to be anything but that. There's too much to unpack to fit into the original thread, so a friend suggested I post here instead. My original post essentially cracked open a Pandora's box within my family. To sum it up, my parents and older sister had become far too comfortable relying on me to handle childcare for my young triplet nephews. I didn't move out of my parents' home until I was 22 because I was trying to save money while attending college. My scholarship covered a significant portion of my expenses, and staying at home helped me avoid debt since I was only working part-time. I'm genuinely grateful for that support. However, after I graduated, everyone seemed to assume I had endless free time and roped me into a family vacation under the guise of it being a break for all of us. Instead, I was forced into babysitting my 3 nephews, who were 6 years old at the time. I even had to share a hotel room with them, which was a nightmare. Those boys wouldn't listen to a word I said, until I called their mother. Less likely to think that night, those boys were her. And yet I was still treated like the bad guy just for wanting to do activities that didn't align with everyone else's interests. Apparently, if the family doesn't enjoy something as a whole, it's vetoed entirely. The irony is, I'm part of the family, but my interests didn't seem to count. I brought this up to my parents after my last post, and to their credit they admitted they were in the wrong. That disastrous vacation was the final straw for me. I decided it was time to move out, and I did so before the summer was over. I gave them no warning, which caught everyone off guard. Fortunately, I had landed a fantastic job right after college, thanks to an internship, and moving out cut my commute from 45 minutes to just 15. My sister was the most upset about this, because it meant she no longer had free weekend babysitting at her disposal. But she still tried to rope me into babysitting. Sometimes I gave in, usually after being bribed with pizza, and this pattern became the new normal. But then, last month my parents announced plans for another family vacation to the same coastal spot. They wanted to replicate last year's trip, and I immediately saw it for what it was. A trap. I knew that if I rode with my parents and let them book the hotel rooms, I'd end up stuck in the same miserable situation as before. So, I casually mentioned that I'd drive myself and pay for my own room. That's when everything hit the fan. When my parents realized they couldn't set me up the same way, they resorted to pleading, while my sister tried to gaslight me into just going with the flow. Spoiler alert, I didn't cave. After standing firm against my sister's demands and enduring days of harassment, I decided to post my story online. Somehow my sister stumbled across it within an hour. What followed was a complete Pandora's box situation. At first the entire family turned against me. My sister called our parents, who immediately called me, while they read through my post. During the call I asked my parents if anything I wrote was untrue. Instead of answering directly, they sidestepped the question and dismissed it as an exaggeration. So, I pointed out specific details that were undeniably accurate and challenged them to check the comments. At that point, the post had already accumulated so many comments that they couldn't keep up. I kept refreshing the page on my home computer, relaying the ever-growing number of comments to them. Then, I told them I was fed up with their keep the peace mentality, which always came at my expense to placate my sister. Before hanging up I said we'd have to finish the conversation later. By the time we spoke again, the comments had essentially doubled. Thousands of people were weighing in, and my parents were completely horrified. The sheer volume of feedback forced them to take a hard look at their own behavior. My sister tried to call me while I was at work to rant, but my phone was on silent, so all she could do was leave voicemails and texts. She was relentless though, and finally got through to me during my lunch break. The gist of her complaint was that my post had turned our parents against her, and now they were angry at her. The argument between my sister and our parents escalated to the point where they decided to cancel the entire vacation. Later, they admitted they had initially tried to shift the blame onto me out of embarrassment, but they eventually took full responsibility. They acknowledged that they'd been unfair by constantly using me as their go-to babysitter, even after I'd moved out. They did attempt to justify their actions by saying they never charged me rent while I lived at home during college, but I reminded them that children don't ask to be born, and I'd been doing my best to become self-sufficient. I also pointed out that my father had received similar support from his parents when he was in college. They'd let him live at home rent-free. That shut down any further arguments from my parents. When my sister managed to reach me during lunch, I laid out the facts for her. That's when she revealed her true colors. She implied that I have no life and that my free time on weekends should be spent helping her because she's overwhelmed and can't even go out without bringing her kids unless someone watches them. Let's be real, she's a stay-at-home mom, her husband earns a decent salary and they live in a fully paid-off house. Meanwhile, my nephews are not my responsibility. They were forced on me, and everyone just assumed it would stay that way. When I pointed this out, my sister angrily hung up on me, but not before I recorded the conversation. Later I played the recording for my parents and they were furious. They confronted my sister, which led to a full-on family war. My sister doubled down, blamed me for everything, and even declared that my life should revolve around hers. I told her that was the most self-centered and entitled thing she'd ever said to me. It took days, but eventually her husband stepped in and forced her to apologize to me. I'd never seen her so shaken by anyone, but my sister was on the verge of tears. During her apology it came out that one reason I'd been the go-to babysitter was that she didn't trust strangers with her kids. It wasn't about money. Or was it? Turns out my brother-in-law had assumed my sister had been paying me properly for my time after I moved out of our parents' house. In reality, she hadn't even reimbursed me for gas. She'd only given me enough money to order pizza for myself and the kids, while pocketing the rest. When this was revealed during her half-hearted apology, my brother-in-law blew up at her. He forced her to pay me everything she owed in cash, entirely out of her savings. She looked absolutely miserable handing it over. Afterward, my brother-in-law personally apologized for not stepping in sooner and allowing my sister to take advantage of me. He promised they'd hire a proper babysitter moving forward. Sure, it'll cost them more, but my sister will finally get her precious date nights back. Then came the family meeting the other evening. We all gathered at my parents' house, where everything was laid out on the table. Apologies were exchanged all around. My parents decided to reinstate the family vacation, and I made it clear that I would still be driving myself and covering the cost of my own hotel room. In fact, I stated outright that I'd stay in an entirely different hotel if my sister tried to rope me into babysitting again. She promised it wouldn't happen. If I don't update again after the vacation next month, you'll know everything went smoothly. Update 2. My sister called me, demanding that I take down my posts. She's now more upset than ever after realizing how far the story has spread. Having a family that knows about your Reddit account definitely has its downsides. Yesterday after I got off work, she called to ask if comments were still coming in. She admitted she couldn't bring herself to look at them because they were so hurtful. I didn't sugarcoat my response. I told her that at least 10 comments are still coming in daily and most of them are saying pretty much the same things about her behavior. She started crying, demanding that I delete my Reddit posts, but I refused. I told her she could cry to whoever she wanted but the posts were staying up. They're my assurance that she won't try to treat me like garbage again. Let's not forget she literally thought my life should revolve around hers, didn't pay me the babysitting money she was supposed to and pocketed it instead, and turned me into the full-time babysitter on last year's family vacation where I barely got to enjoy myself. Is it really surprising that people are angry with her after hearing how she treated me? Then I mentioned that the posts have already spread to other platforms. I've been asked a couple of times to allow articles to be written about my situation, and some videos have even been made. When my sister heard that, she shrieked and hung up the phone. Then my parents called, begging me to take the posts down. I refused. I reminded them that this all happened because they never stood up for me. None of this would have come to this point if they had told my sister to treat me like an equal, instead of like a servant. I'm not her butler, babysitter, or handyman. I'm her brother and a grown man. I asked them, wouldn't you be fed up with this crap if you were in my shoes? They agreed but kept pleading with me to take down the posts. I stood firm, telling them that I would keep posting if they didn't start sticking up for me when my sister comes running to them. I made it clear, let her clean up her own messes. Their constant enabling of her behavior is what caused this situation in the first place. I didn't father those kids. I have my own life, a career I'm still new to, and hopefully a girlfriend soon, as there's someone I'm planning to ask out. I'm moving forward with my life and I refuse to let anyone hold me back. I told them they have two choices. Either step out of my way, or continue enabling my sister and watch how badly that turns out for them. I also explained that the only way I'll stop posting on Reddit is if the drama stops entirely. I've kept everything anonymous, and I have every right to express my frustrations. That's when my mom started crying, and my dad went completely silent. I told them, tears don't move me. You know what needs to happen to fix this? Stop enabling her. Well, my sister called me again, furious. She said our parents had told her they were done dealing with this and that she needed to figure it out on her own. Oh, and they also told her to be nicer to me. I couldn't help but picture her face twitching in frustration, internally screaming, be nice to my kid, brother? What even is this? I couldn't resist being sarcastic and told her, should I Google it for you? That of course led to her crying before I hung up. Later my brother-in-law called to get my side of the story. He wasn't thrilled that I was still posting online and that it made his wife cry. But after I explained everything, he said he'd have another talk with her. I'm hoping this is where the drama ends. The family vacation is still happening in late June and I've already booked my own room. I also put in for a day off work so we can all leave on a Friday. My room isn't anywhere near the ones my parents, sister, brother-in-law and nephews will be using. In fact, it's not even on the same floor. When we get to the coast, I plan to fully enjoy myself. For the non-family activities, I'm doing whatever I want. I'll tour the art galleries, indulge in local food, and savor the freedom of finally having a carefree vacation. Update 3. After the family vacation. The vacation has come and gone, and some things went as expected, for both good and bad. The good: my parents didn't enable my sister's attempts to make me babysit. The bad: my sister did try to figure out which room I was staying in, but she failed and ended up in trouble with her husband again. Thankfully I had planned ahead. I called the hotel in advance and requested that they not give out any of my information to anyone except law enforcement if absolutely necessary. The staff assured me they wouldn't share anything with anyone. On the morning of the trip, I left earlier than the rest of the family. Knowing how slow they'd be, I figured they wouldn't even start moving until around 10 a.m. So I hit the road at 9 a.m., even though check-in wasn't until 1 p.m. I just wanted to ensure I had a head start. I sent out an FYI group text before leaving and was off. Sure enough, my parents were upset because they'd apparently planned a family brunch along the way. However, no one had told me about it, so they scrapped that plan and went with fast food instead. Just as I expected, I arrived at the hotel well before check-in time. Too early, in fact. But I didn't mind waiting, knowing I'd secured my independence for this trip. But I made sure to cover my bases. When I arrived early at the hotel, I spoke to the desk staff to confirm that neither my parents nor my sister would be able to access my information. They assured me that sharing details was against policy, but I told them I was well aware that policies like that sometimes get bent under pressure. I made it clear, if they had to deal with my mother, sister and 3 crying boys trying to guilt them, they absolutely could not give in. They awkwardly promised that only I would have access to my room no matter what. Feeling somewhat reassured, I left to grab some food. When I returned an hour later, I noticed both my parents' car and my brother-in-law's SUV in the parking lot. Before heading to my room, I stopped at the desk to check in and asked if my family had asked about me. Of course they had. The desk clerk told me my sister had tried to get my room number, but the staff refused to share it. Apparently she pushed hard until her husband stepped in and told her to stop. Relieved, I checked in, went to my room and called my parents to let them know I'd arrived. Conveniently, no one mentioned the little scene at the front desk. Later we all met up as a family to go out and explore. At one point my sister asked me to watch the kids for a moment. I immediately replied with a firm hell no. I knew exactly what she was trying to pull. She'd disappear for a moment and conveniently be gone for an hour or more. I called her out on it right then and there, and her husband backed me up, telling her to stop trying to dump the kids on me. What did my sister do? She burst into tears, saying she needed a break. Her husband scolded her, pointing out that he was tired too but wasn't complaining. Cue my mother giving me a nasty look. I turned to her and made it crystal clear, if she even thought about pushing me to watch those kids, I'd leave the family vacation right then and there. I told her it wasn't my job and I was done being treated like it was. That made my mother cry too. She kept repeating, "You're right, you're right." I recognized this tactic. It's one she's used before, trying to look pathetic to guilt me into backing down. But I didn't budge. I told her, I am right, so just let it go, and that was the end of it. Before walking away, neither my mother nor sister tried anything else for the rest of the day. When we returned to the hotel after dinner, my family crowded into the elevator, but I stayed back. When they asked why, I said I'd wait for the next one. My sister shot me a glare because she knew exactly what I was doing, ensuring I wasn't trapped with them. Instead, I sat in the lobby watching YouTube on my phone for 15 minutes, before finally taking the elevator up to my room. Being on a different floor and the opposite end of the hotel, I had a peaceful and relaxing night. The next morning we went out for breakfast. I made sure to let them leave first and was the last one to join, just as I had been the last one to return to the hotel the night before. Breakfast went smoothly, and I announced that I'd be doing my own thing for most of the day. My mother tried to bring up plans to visit the aquarium and a couple of other places. I told her I'd join them for those specific activities, but the rest of the day was mine, until family dinner. They accepted this arrangement and the day went well. Back at the hotel that evening, things took a turn. As I was leaving my room to head to dinner, my sister caught me. She must have been wandering the floor trying to find me. Earlier I'd gone back to my room to rest after a long day of walking, and apparently she had been staking out the hallway. She confronted me, saying I'd ruined the family vacation for her. According to her, this trip was no different from being at home since she still had to wrangle her kids. I called nonsense, pointing out that her parents were helping her plenty. Then I told her I was done with this endless routine of being her scapegoat. I said, "It's already over. Leave me the hell alone and focus on your own life." I turned to leave, but she started yelling, "Hey, I'm trying to talk to you." I told her I didn't care and walked to the elevator to head to dinner. She followed me in silence as we rode the elevator down together. At dinner I didn't stay quiet about it. I told my parents and my brother-in-law that my sister had been stalking the floor to find my room. That was the final straw for me, and I wasn't going to let it slide. She was scolded like a child. After getting an earful, my sister threw herself a pity party. I told her to stop milking it, grow up and accept that the days of forcing her will on me were over. Then I walked out of the lobby, got into my car and drove off. This time I was the first one to arrive at dinner. When the rest of the family showed up, my sister looked visibly depressed, but nothing was said about the earlier incident, which was just fine by me. She avoided making eye contact with me throughout the evening, and I didn't lose any sleep over it. I laid down clear boundaries. Before heading back to my room, I told everyone bluntly, unless it's an emergency, no one is to knock on my door. The do not disturb sign on my room wasn't just for show. The final day of the trip went smoothly. Neither my sister nor my mother tried to bother me. It was clear they had fully surrendered at this point. And for what it's worth, I didn't completely shut out my nephews. I'm not heartless. I spent some time playing with them and being the fun uncle. I just wasn't the babysitter uncle. The kids didn't seem to care about the change. They were just happy to hang out. I even bought each of them a small baggie of crystals and polished stones as souvenirs to take home. There was some minor tension between my sister and her husband, but it was nothing major, just small disagreements I didn't bother to pay attention to. Overall, I'd call the vacation a win. My mother and sister finally got the message that the old dynamic where they could walk all over me is over. I have my own life now. Update 4. Mother and sister saw my last post. It seems they really don't know when to leave well enough alone. Hey mom, hey sis, I warned you that if you kept this up I'd head straight back to Reddit, and here we are. The short version is that my mother and sister found my last post and lost it. My sister admitted she had been stalking my account for days, knowing I'd probably post an update. What did she expect? That I'd just say everyone had a great time? She called me in tears, claiming I made her look like a bad mother. My response? Well, if the glass slipper fits. That didn't go over well. She kept arguing, but I asked her to point out a single lie in my post. She tried several times, but I shut her down each time by pointing out that every single detail was accurate. So what does my sister do? She calls mommy. Not long after, my mother showed up at my door, demanding that I delete all the posts. I told her no, and now I have material for yet another update. I ended up making her leave in tears. Later, I spoke with both my mother and father over the phone. I bluntly told them that their years of enabling my sister's behavior were what created the toxic family dynamic in the first place. I made it crystal clear that I would never go back to how things were. If they had any lingering hope that I might, I snuffed it out for good during that call. Eventually my parents told my sister to stop blaming me and leave me alone, saying they couldn't take the stress of my continued retaliation. Meanwhile, my sister spiraled into a full-blown nobody loves me pity party, and my parents had to snap her back to reality. As for my brother-in-law, He hasn't reached out, which makes me think he's staying neutral or just avoiding the entire situation. Honestly, I feel for him because this mess can't be good for his marriage, or for any familial connection we might have had. Out of respect for him, I'll say this. Sorry man, but your wife pushed me way too far. The current status? My parents are now insisting that my sister get counseling. They've realized she can't juggle the responsibilities of being a mom while still trying to live as if nothing has changed. She needs to woman up, as they put it. A message for my sister. If this truly is my last post, hear me out, sis. If you can't stop thinking I'm your personal slave, babysitter, watchdog, whatever, and you want to keep acting like the whole world is against you because you can no longer control me, then we can't be around each other. But if you're willing to move past this nonsense and treat me like an equal, then maybe we can get along. Don't give me a reason to write another post and this all ends here. I'll only write about people who treat me poorly in the future. Treat me with respect and we'll call it a truce. Capiche? Final update. I had a long conversation with my parents, and they apologized for their role in everything. For now, we've agreed that I'll maintain some distance from the family until Thanksgiving. Last night I also had a man-to-man talk with my brother-in-law over some cold beers. He told me that he's asked my sister to get counseling, and even warned her that if she doesn't, he's ready to separate from her. They're now in the process of finding her a counselor. He admitted that while my sister was awful to me, at home, she's a loving and endearing wife. However, she also confessed to him that she had always resented no longer being an only child. With nearly a decade between us in age, she let that resentment build up over the years. To her credit, she's agreed she needs counseling, and will start as soon as possible. They've also hired a qualified babysitter to look after my nephews, which should help ease some tension. My brother-in-law also acknowledged that he was angry with me at points, but admitted that he should have stepped in when I needed him. We agreed that this entire situation was a nightmare for everyone, and it's best to leave it in the past. On a positive note, these posts unexpectedly helped me land a girlfriend. The girl I've been interested in had a hunch that the posts were about me, and was just waiting for me to confirm it. We're going on our first date tonight, and I couldn't be happier. Thank you everyone for your immense support. It meant the world to me.